Welcome to Drift to Sleep. Hello, my friend. Thank you for joining me tonight. Welcome back to Drift to Sleep. If you enjoy cozy bedtime stories and gentle fairy tales, you can always support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. But for now, simply get comfortable. The story you're about to hear is called The Pumpkin Spice Cottage on Briar Hill. Take a slow breath in and a slow breath out, and let's begin. High above the village of Fern Hollow, where the fields gave way to woodland, and the woodland climbed gently into the hills, there stood a small stone cottage. It rested on the shoulder of Briar Hill, surrounded by blackberry hedges, old oak trees, and winding footpaths that disappeared into the forest. In spring, the hedges were full of white blossoms. In summer, they grew heavy with dark berries. But in autumn, they became a tangle of copper leaves, bare twigs, and tiny red hips that shone like beads after rain. The villagers called the place Pumpkin Spice Cottage, not because the cottage was painted orange. It was not. Its walls were made from grey stone, softened by moss in the cracks. Its roof was dark slate. Its door was deep green, with a brass knocker shaped like an acorn, and pumpkins did not grow thickly all around it, though Hazel usually set a few by the porch steps when October arrived. No, the cottage earned its name for another reason. Whenever autumn settled over Briar Hill, the entire house seemed to fill with the scent of cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, ginger, vanilla, warm butter, and baked pumpkin. Some mornings, the fragrance drifted down the lane and reached the village before Hazel did. People would open their windows, breathe in, and smile. "The hill is awake," they would say. "Pumpkin Spice Cottage has begun again." The cottage belonged to a woman named Hazel. She was a candle maker by trade, though many people thought of her as a keeper of comfort. She made candles for reading corners, candles for rainy kitchens, candles for long winter baths, candles for bedside tables, stormy evenings, and first cups of tea. Not ordinary candles, comfort candles, candles that seemed to remember cozy things. One candle might smell faintly of honey and cedar, another of apple peel and clean wool, another of rain on stone steps, another of old libraries, warm blankets, and the soft dust of forgotten pages. Villagers often joked that Hazel could turn a feeling into a candle scent, and perhaps there was a little truth to that. On this particular afternoon, autumn had fully settled over Briar Hill. The sky was covered in a soft blanket of grey clouds, not gloomy, not heavy, just gently grey, as though the whole world had pulled on a wool shawl. A cool breeze moved through the trees. Golden leaves drifted across the hillside like tiny boats sailing through the air. From far below, Fern Hollow looked small and sleepy, its chimneys breathing pale ribbons of smoke into the afternoon. Hazel sat on her front porch, wrapped in a cream-colored cardigan that had stretched a little at the cuffs from years of use. A warm mug rested between her hands, steam curled upward from pumpkin spice tea. Beside her chair sat a basket filled with acorns she had collected during a morning walk. Some were smooth and brown, some still wore their rough little caps. One was so perfectly round that Hazel had set it aside to keep on her work table. The world felt wonderfully still. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called from an oak branch. A squirrel scampered through the fallen leaves near the woodpile, and from inside the cottage came the gentle ticking of a brass clock, steady and familiar. Hazel took a slow sip of tea. The flavor was warm and mellow. Cinnamon first, then clove, then the soft sweetness of pumpkin and honey. It reminded her of cozy kitchens and lantern-lit evenings. She smiled. This was exactly the kind of day she loved. Not too bright, not too cold, just comfortably autumn. The kind of day made for baking, candle making, reading, firelight, and long quiet walks through paths where every leaf seemed to glow. She watched a cluster of leaves spiral downward from a nearby maple tree. They turned and turned, each one taking its time. One landed on the porch beside her boot. It was shaped almost perfectly like a star. Hazel picked it up carefully by the stem. The leaf glowed gold in the afternoon light. She turned it over in her fingers, admiring the tiny veins. Autumn always seemed full of little gifts, the kind a person could miss if they moved too quickly. Hazel was in no hurry. She finished her tea slowly, listening to the wind move through the hedges. Then, when the mug was empty and the porch had grown just a touch cooler, she stood and carried the cup inside. The cottage greeted Hazel with familiar warmth. The living room was comfortably small. A stone fireplace occupied one wall, built from the same grey rock as the outside of the cottage. A stack of logs rested in a copper basket beside it. Above the mantel were jars of dried flowers, small framed sketches of the forest, and several unlit candles in soft shades of cream, gold, and brown. Shelves overflowed with books. Some stood neatly upright, others leaned tiredly against one another. A few were stacked sideways because Hazel had run out of room long ago and refused to part with any of them. Handmade quilts rested across chairs and sofas. A record player stood beside the window, and everywhere candles. Tall candles, short candles, lantern candles, tiny candles shaped like acorns, pine cones, mushrooms, and little curled leaves. Each waited patiently for evening. Hazel crossed the living room and entered the kitchen. The room smelled faintly of vanilla and brown sugar from yesterday's baking. Copper pans hung above the stove. Bundles of dried herbs rested near the windows. Rosemary, thyme, sage, lavender. A small bunch of cinnamon sticks tied with twine. The wooden table at the center of the room held a large orange pumpkin waiting to be transformed into something delicious. The pumpkin had come from a neighbor's garden lower on the hill. Hazel had traded 3 beeswax candles for it 2 days before. It was round and cheerful, with a stem that curved like the handle of an old teapot. Hazel rested her hand on top of it. "Well," she said softly, "today is your day." She had a plan. She intended to make pumpkin spice hand pies. They were one of her favorite autumn treats. Simple enough for a quiet afternoon, special enough to make the cottage feel extra cozy. First, she washed her hands in warm water scented lightly with a small bar of oatmeal soap. Then she rolled up her sleeves and prepared the pastry dough. Flour, butter, a pinch of salt, a spoonful of sugar, a little cold water. The familiar process felt grounding. She cut the butter into the flour until it became pale crumbs. Then she drizzled in the water, slowly, carefully, just enough to bring the dough together. It formed beneath her hands, soft and smooth but not sticky. Hazel patted it into a round disc, wrapped it in a clean cloth, and placed it in the cool pantry to rest. "Rest is important," she said to the dough. She liked saying things like that in her kitchen. Dough, soup, candles, and houseplants all seemed to appreciate being spoken to kindly. Next came the filling. Hazel sliced the pumpkin open. The inside was bright and fragrant. She scooped out the seeds and set them aside to roast later with salt and a little smoked paprika. Then she cut the pumpkin into cubes, placed them in a baking dish, and slid them into the oven. While the pumpkin softened, she prepared her spice mixture: cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, cloves, a little cardamom. She crushed the spices lightly with a pestle, just enough to wake them. Their fragrance rose immediately. Warm, sweet, earthy, deeply autumnal. Soon the pumpkin grew tender and golden. Hazel blended it with brown sugar, maple syrup, the spice mixture, and a small pat of butter. The filling became rich and smooth. Its scent spread through every corner of the kitchen. Hazel closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Yes, this smelled exactly like autumn. Not just the idea of autumn, but the feeling of coming indoors after a walk in cool air. The feeling of warm socks. The feeling of sitting near the window while rain taps the glass. While the filling cooled, Hazel turned her attention to candle making. A batch of beeswax candles waited in molds on the workshop table beside the kitchen. This room was Hazel's favorite place to work. A narrow window looked out over the forest path. Shelves held jars of dried petals, oils, wicks, molds, labels, ribbons, and little tins of powdered color. The beeswax sat in a warm pot, golden and fragrant. Hazel had prepared it earlier that morning. She carefully checked each candle mold. Their scent was a new blend she had been developing all week. Pumpkin spice, cedarwood, a touch of vanilla, and the faintest hint of smoke. She called it Autumn Hearth. The fragrance reminded her of warm blankets, crackling fires, pumpkin bread, and evenings when the sky turned dark early but the house stayed bright. Perfect for this time of year. One by one, she removed the candles from their molds. Each emerged smooth and golden. Some were simple pillars, some were shaped like tiny lanterns. A few were made in little clay cups, perfect for bedside tables. Hazel trimmed each wick, smoothed the edges, polished the surface lightly with a cloth. Then she lined them neatly across the table, like sleepy little lanterns waiting for sunset. The cottage felt wonderfully productive, but never rushed. Nothing hurried Hazel. She simply moved from one cozy task to another, pastry resting, pumpkin cooling, candles settling, tea steeping, firewood waiting. Outside, leaves continued drifting past the windows. Inside, autumn gathered gently around her. When the pastry had rested long enough, Hazel rolled it thin and cut it into circles. She spooned pumpkin filling into the center of each one, folded the dough over, pressed the edges with a fork, and brushed the tops with milk. Then she sprinkled each hand pie with cinnamon sugar. They went into the oven looking humble, but soon the kitchen filled with the scent of butter, pumpkin, spice, and warm pastry. Hazel set the timer, wiped the table, and stood for a moment with flour on her hands. The cottage was quiet, the clock ticked, the oven warmed. The candles glowed in their own gentle way, even without flame. It was the kind of afternoon that seemed to say, "Stay, breathe. This is enough." By late afternoon, the hand pies were cooling on wire racks. Their edges were golden, their centers puffed slightly with warm pumpkin filling. The candles were finished, labeled, and wrapped in brown paper for tomorrow's village market. And Hazel felt ready for a walk, a little walk before evening, just enough to enjoy the forest air, just enough to return with cold cheeks and a stronger appreciation for the fire. She wrapped a plaid scarf around her neck, pulled on sturdy boots, placed one fresh hand pie into a small cloth pouch for later, and stepped outside. The air felt cooler now. Evening was beginning its slow approach. The porch stones held the day's fading chill. The hedges rustled softly beside the path. Hazel closed the green door behind her and followed a narrow trail leading into the forest beyond Briar Hill. The path wound between towering oaks and maples. Leaves covered the ground in shades of gold, copper, chestnut, and crimson. Each step produced a soft crunch, sometimes a dry, crisp sound, sometimes a quieter brushing when the leaves were still damp beneath. The forest seemed peaceful, sleepy, content. Hazel walked slowly. There was no destination, no schedule, just the pleasure of wandering. She passed an old stone wall half covered in moss. Tiny ferns grew between its cracks. On top of one stone sat a snail, moving so slowly that it appeared to be thinking deeply about each inch of its journey. Hazel paused to admire it. "Take your time," she said. The snail did. A little farther along, she reached a small wooden bridge crossing a stream. Water flowed beneath it in gentle ripples. The surface reflected drifting leaves and grey clouds overhead. Hazel leaned on the railing. The wood was cool beneath her hands. A family of ducks floated downstream. One small duck paddled with great concentration, keeping close to the others. The sight made Hazel smile. The stream carried leaves the way a road carries travelers, one after another. Gold, brown, red, gold again. Beyond the bridge, the path entered a grove of silver birch trees. Their pale trunks glowed softly against the darker forest. The breeze stirred their leaves. Thousands of tiny golden coins seemed to shimmer overhead. Hazel continued deeper into the woods. The forest smelled of damp bark, mushrooms, and the soft sweetness of decaying leaves. It was one of her favorite autumn scents, rich and earthy, a reminder that everything in nature was always becoming something else. A leaf becoming soil, a seed becoming root, a quiet afternoon becoming evening. Eventually she noticed something unusual. Tiny lanterns, dozens of them, hanging among the trees. At first she thought someone from the village had decorated the forest path for a festival. But as she approached, she realized the lanterns were unlike anything she had seen before. They were not made of glass, or paper, or metal. Each one looked like a flower, a closed blossom with petals shaped like a lantern shade. Each glowed softly without flame, amber, gold, warm cream. Some hung from branches by silver threads, others floated just above the ground, and none seemed disturbed by the wind. Hazel slowed. Curiosity tugged gently at her. The lantern flowers formed a trail. one that certainly had not been there yesterday or the day before. The glowing lights wound deeper into the forest, slipping between trees, over roots, and around mossy stones. Hazel looked back once toward the path home, then forward again. The lanterns did not feel troubling. They felt inviting, like a row of candles placed carefully in a window. So Hazel followed them. The lantern trail eventually opened into a hidden clearing. Hazel stopped in amazement. The entire space was filled with glowing lantern flowers, thousands of them. They rose from the forest floor in clusters. Some were small as teacups, some tall as sunflowers. Their petals resembled tiny paper lanterns, folded and ribbed and glowing from within. Amber, gold, soft orange, warm cream. A few were pale green, like moonlight shining through leaves. Together they transformed the clearing into a sea of autumn light. At the center stood an elderly gardener. He wore a long brown coat, soft boots, and a hat decorated with oak leaves. In one hand he carried a lantern-shaped watering can, in the other a basket filled with glowing seeds. He looked as though he belonged entirely to the forest, the way moss belongs to stone and stars belong to night. The gardener smiled when he saw Hazel. "Good evening," Hazel smiled back. "Good evening." The gardener gestured toward the flowers. "Welcome to the lantern garden." Hazel looked around, still amazed. "I've walked these woods for years," she said softly. "I've never seen this place before." "Most people haven't," said the gardener. "It appears only when autumn reaches its softest hour." Hazel liked that phrase, autumn's softest hour. It sounded exactly like the air felt. The gardener explained that the garden appeared only during the most beautiful autumn evenings, when the season reached its perfect balance, not too warm, not too cold, not too early, not too late. When the last golden leaves still clung to branches, when the first thoughts of winter had begun to gather at the edge of the sky, when people started lighting lamps before supper, that was when the lantern garden woke. "The flowers gather the final golden light of autumn," the gardener said. "They keep it safe through the colder months." Hazel stepped carefully between the glowing blossoms. Their light reflected on her boots. The air smelled faintly of honey, cedar, and warm wax. It was a scent very close to her own candle workshop, but somehow wilder, older, as though the forest had been making comfort candles long before she had learned how. Each blossom held a little piece of seasonal warmth, a little reminder of cozy afternoons, comforting kitchens, crackling fires, pumpkin pastries cooling on racks, tea held in both hands, walks through falling leaves, stories read under blankets. Hazel felt as though every good autumn moment she had ever loved was blooming around her. The gardener led her to a stone bench near the center of the clearing. Beside it stood a small table made from a tree stump. On the table was a teapot, 2 cups, and a plate of something that looked very much like seed cakes. "Will you sit?" the gardener asked. Hazel did. The tea was golden and fragrant. It tasted of apple peel, toasted nuts, and a little spice. Hazel took a small piece of seed cake. It was warm, soft, barely sweet. The gardener asked about her cottage, her candles, her pumpkin spice blend. Hazel told him about autumn hearth, about beeswax and cedar wood, about trying to capture the feeling of firelight in a scent. The gardener nodded thoughtfully. Firelight is difficult, he said. It changes every moment. Yes, Hazel said. That's what makes it lovely. They sat quietly after that. The lantern flowers swayed in a breeze Hazel could not feel. Their glow deepened as twilight gathered. The gardener reached into his basket and lifted a tiny lantern seed. It was no larger than a hazelnut. It glowed softly in his palm. A gift, he said. For your cottage. Hazel accepted it carefully. The seed felt pleasantly warm, almost like holding a tiny ember from a fireplace. What should I do with it? Place it near a window, said the gardener. Speak kindly to it. Give it a little water, a little patience, and on dark evenings, let it remind you that autumn light never truly disappears. It simply finds smaller places to rest. Hazel closed her fingers gently around the seed. Thank you, she said. The gardener smiled. The flowers around them glowed a little brighter, as though they too were pleased. As twilight deepened, Hazel eventually returned home. The lantern garden remained glowing behind her among the trees. The path of lantern flowers guided her back to the familiar trail. One by one, as she passed, the blossoms dimmed behind her, not vanishing suddenly, just settling, like candles being shaded for the night. The little seed rested safely in her pocket, warm against her side. By the time she reached Briar Hill, the first star had appeared. Pumpkin Spice Cottage looked especially welcoming now. Golden light shone through the windows. Smoke curled from the chimney. The green door waited beneath its acorn knocker. A few pumpkins rested on the porch steps, their round shapes softened by dusk. Hazel paused outside for a moment, simply appreciating the sight of home. There are few feelings as comforting as returning to a warm house after a cool walk, especially when the house smells of pastry, beeswax, and wood smoke. Inside, Hazel lit several of her new candles. Autumn hearth. The scent spread gently through the cottage. Pumpkin spice, vanilla, cedar, a whisper of smoke. Comfort. She placed one candle beside the fireplace, another near the bookshelf, a third on the kitchen table. Then she set one in the front window, where its soft glow could be seen from the lane. Soon warm light danced across every room. The cottage seemed to glow from the inside out. Hazel prepared a simple supper, vegetable soup with barley and carrots, fresh bread warmed near the fire, and one pumpkin spice hand pie for dessert. She ate slowly at the kitchen table, listening to the wind move around the cottage. The soup warmed her, the bread was soft, the hand pie was exactly as she had hoped. Buttery pastry, spiced pumpkin, a little sweetness, a little warmth. After washing her bowl and setting it to dry, Hazel carried a mug of spiced milk into the living room. She settled into her favorite armchair beside the fire. A knitted blanket covered her lap. A book rested in one hand. The lantern seed sat beside her mug on a saucer, glowing softly, almost breathing. Outside, evening wrapped the hillside in darkness. Inside, the cottage glowed, the fireplace crackled, candles flickered, pages turned quietly. The entire world seemed reduced to warmth, light, and comfort. Hazel could not imagine a better autumn evening. After a few pages, her eyes drifted from the book to the seed. The gardener's words returned to her. A little water, a little patience, a little kindness. Hazel rose and found a small clay pot in the workshop. She filled it with dark soil from a bag she kept for herbs. Then she pressed the lantern seed gently into the center. Not too deep, not too shallow. She placed the pot near the front window beside the candle. Then she poured a little water from a blue glass pitcher. The seed glowed brighter for a moment beneath the soil. A warm amber light spread through the pot. Then it settled into a steady glow. Hazel smiled. Something told her it would grow into something wonderful. Perhaps not tomorrow, perhaps not even next week, but someday, and the thought made the cottage feel even more alive. Later, when bedtime approached, Hazel stepped onto the porch one final time. The forest beyond Briar Hill was dark, but far among the trees, she thought she could still glimpse tiny lantern lights. Soft, golden, almost hidden between the trunks. The lantern garden was there, waiting, preserving autumn's warmth for the colder months ahead. A cool breeze drifted across the hillside. The scent of leaves and wood smoke filled the air. Somewhere in the village below, a dog barked once. Then all was quiet again. Hazel wrapped her cardigan a little tighter around herself. Then she looked through the cottage window. Inside, the candles flickered low, the fireplace glowed, and the clay pot on the windowsill shone with a tiny amber light. A small star of autumn, a promise of cozy days still to come. Satisfied, Hazel returned indoors. She closed the green door, set the latch, banked the fire, blew out the candles one by one. The cottage grew darker, but not cold. The lantern seed still glowed softly by the window. Tomorrow would bring more baking, more candles, more walks, perhaps a trip to the village market, perhaps another visit to the forest path, perhaps, if the season was kind, another glimpse of the hidden lantern garden. For now, though, Briar Hill was peaceful, Pumpkin Spice Cottage was warm, and Hazel was exactly where she wanted to be. And now our story has come to its quiet end. The lantern garden is resting among the trees. Its glowing flowers are swaying gently in the night breeze. The elderly gardener has finished tending the blossoms. The lantern seeds are tucked safely beneath the soil. And Pumpkin Spice Cottage is warm and peaceful beneath the stars. The candles are burning low. The fireplace crackles softly. The pumpkin hand pies are cooling in the kitchen, and Hazel's cozy cottage is wrapped in gentle autumn silence. The little clay pot by the window is glowing softly now, holding its small golden promise, holding the last warm light of the season. You do not need to follow the lantern trail tonight. You do not need to search for the hidden garden. You do not need to walk any farther through the autumn woods. You can simply rest here. Let the glow of lantern flowers soften in your thoughts. Let the scent of pumpkin spice drift gently through your imagination. Let the cottage fire become warm and low. Let your breathing become slow and peaceful. Thank you for listening to Drift to Sleep. I'm Adele Nguyen, and I'll be back soon with more cozy sleep stories and bedtime fairy tales. For now, keep your eyes closed. Let your body relax. Let the night hold you gently. Sleep well. Good night.